shall we look at emerald? Because you drew me to it. And I have one which I thought, which I had marked, which is called Nursing Wing, and it's on page 8.
Yeah.
And I think we met some years ago after my mum and your mum were at the crossroads in their personal lives. And it was Ruth, it was Elaine who called me and said that I could phone you and visit you. I felt a bit shy, actually, but it was so natural. And also, I remember I was struggling with finishing Lipkin, and you just said, "Oh, just send it, just do it." And that I then sent it immediately to the publisher. So would you be interested in reading Nursing Wing? Would you do that?
Yeah.
So it's page 8.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us something about it? But I mean, it speaks for itself.
So my mum, the book Emerald, it had a sort of interesting genesis in a way. I was interested in the idea of emerald and of value, why we value what we do, and why on earth a bit of green stone should become so valuable, more valuable than diamonds. And also my son-in-law is Colombian. My daughter has spent 10 years, she's an anthropologist in Colombia. So, and the first emeralds were discovered in Colombia. The history of emeralds is extraordinary. The Spanish discovered that the Indians were mining them. And of course, they then horrendously took over the mines, forced the Indians down, and took these bits of green stone and sent them back to Spain. But they also sent them to the Mughals, to India. So there was, from 1600, just before 1600, we know that Colombian emeralds are being worked and incised in Delhi. Isn't that extraordinary?
Amazing.
So from about the 1580s onwards, there was a huge market of flow from Colombia through the Spanish and Portuguese ships to India. Amazing. And the great city of Jaipur, which was founded in the 18th century, became the absolute emerald city, the great mecca of emerald workers, which is sort of mad. But why? So this green stone, and and I went to Colombia. It was too dangerous, not from the mine's point of view, but because there's so much violence. There are too many guns around emeralds, the Emerald Wars in Colombia. But I went to the Emerald Market. I went to an Emerald Museum. I talked emeralds to people, and it's found in very, very carbony rock, so that the miners, when they come out, their faces are absolutely black and filthy. So the idea of this green stands for nature and for renewal, and emeralds are a sort of emblem of luck and renewal and spring and May and Venus and all the rest of it. So there's sort of something sort of counterproductive, or no, not counterproductive, counterintuitive about this emblem of spring found in this hot black mineral stuff. And so I was researching all of that, and I was researching the meanings of emerald and alchemy and God knows what. And then my mother started dying. She was 97 and she was rushed to hospital. And so she sort of hijacked the book, and the book is really about her dying, which this is, she's now in the nursing wing of her, of where she died. But she died very peacefully with all of us around her, 5 children. So this poem is really just about the last moments and her last few months. Nursing Wing. Where have you escaped to? Still air of the nursing wing. Last room on the corridor we shared in those long, hushed hours. Air breathed by a dying mother with all her children round her as she goes, labouring towards the light, climbing new Himalayas at every breath, resolute as always, glasses off but unafraid. Forgive me, little wing, for opening a window when we filled her hands with snowdrops and myrtle to let her spirit out, losing you in compound shiftings of the breeze, ruffling the blackbird standing guard over February buds on the bare cherry tree outside. I have heard your molecules stir somewhere else since, some place I cannot remember. And when I stepped out into the cold whisper of March, you had gone, gentle, dust-filled, exact. Your particles of time, your frost damage and mystery pentangles of family relationships lifting into the smoke of ordinary life, like starlings spiraling to roost in the Avon marshes, where, last November, a white egret waited, hunched, alone in half-ignited sunsets, angling for eels in the bountiful waters of Ham Wall, until the first mist of incomers danced across the heavens, and a million birds, which close up we knew would be shimmering with metallic oils, sapphire, emerald, violet, pointilliste on charcoal feathers, spun into a shape-shifter silhouette, balled up tight as a balloon, then loosening to soot chiffon stretching across white sky, a nursing wing with a helical twist of DNA and folded swirl of a tornado. First time in all her 97 years she witnessed a murmuration.
There were the emeralds. So it's that insight, in a way, to a poet's life. You're living in the soil of family and relationships and experiences and feelings, but then you've got this sort of parallel life, which is the writing life. And you've got these biographies that you're, as I say, vivifying. And yet the poetic I is not you.
When you write the poem and you use the word I, it's not necessarily you. It may be an aspect of you, it doesn't matter, but you are crafting the persona of the speaker, which may be based on you, but it isn't. I mean, when you've got a little poem of 14 lines long, say, the I spoken of in the poem is not necessarily who you are. It's what belongs to the poem. It's the speaker in the poem.
And things can happen. Things can happen in the poem that have absolutely nothing to do with the person who's moving the pen. And this is something people get very confused about, it seems to me. And they look as though they were looking for information at something which is about sound and image.
Yeah, and relationships between words. But I love doing the two biographies are very different because, for one thing, Beethoven wrote in German, and for another thing, his writing, the words he's using are not his main medium of expression. Whereas for Darwin was a good writer. I mean, he wrote, he took a lot of care about his writing, the published work, but also his letters are so full of he wants to express himself and go forward to new ideas all the time. Beethoven is so anguished and very touching. I mean, he wants to be a good man, but he also gets terribly cross with people. And of course, his main medium of expression is the music. So they were very different, but I got very excited, particularly in Beethoven's life, after he had that sort of great explosion of emotion about saying goodbye to the immortal beloved in 1812. And he went off to his brother's house in Linz. And he was getting on very badly with his brother. He was trying to persuade him not to marry the housekeeper whom he was living with. They were having rows. They even came to blows at some point. But he was also very interested in the local music, and there was a local music master he wanted to hear one of the sort of local things of the town, which was these trombone quartets. And finally, he wrote 3 trombone quartets for All Souls Night, November the 2nd. And they're extraordinary pieces, and they're not much known about. They don't have an opus number. And I realized how sad they were. And I thought, these are his real farewell. It is the funeral. It's for All Souls Night. It's funeral music. And it's for the dead. And this is his funeral of love. He didn't love anybody else. He didn't fall in love with anybody else after the immortal beloved. And I thought, my goodness, that is what's happening in him. He's not saying so. He's saying it in the music.
Let's turn a minute to Darwin and this question. There is, as you said, he was an accomplished writer, and there are lots of accounts by his relatives, and you are descended from him. How did you, did that make it difficult to approach him? I know the way you did it was, you use quotes, and you use marginal orientated notes, but you're there. I mean, you're there in your own. Each book is very different. That you could almost be a different person in each book. But children butt like young bulls in his study. I mean, that's page 89. I've lost your. Oh, there you go.
You went away just at the moment you said you are there.
Yes, you are there. That's right. So here we go. Children butt like young bulls in his study. I mean,
yeah. He was
how did you?
Man.
Sorry, say again.
He was a very fatherly man. He enjoyed being a father a lot. He enjoyed the children.
And where did you get that sense from? And how did you make it your? How did
diaries from his memoirs of his children, but also, of course, from my family. And I was one of 5. My mother was one of 6. There's a story about my grandfather sort of looking up the dictionary on the floor, and a sort of grandchild came crawling across the page, and he just gently sort of shoved it away with one hand while he was trying to read on the other. And that's sort of the image that you got for Darwin with his young children.
And the process of deciding how to approach him. I mean, it must have coming from the family must have been inhibiting in a sense. I mean, it was a big responsibility.
Very much time. When I was asked by somebody to do some poems for the anniversary that was coming up, and then the Natural History Museum asked me to do some more. Then I suddenly thought, well, maybe I could do the whole life. So I suggested it to my editor, and she said, "That's a very good idea, but we've got to publish it on February the 12th," because that was his birthday, and by now this was May. And so I really had only 3 months to write it. So I couldn't mess around worrying. I just had to rush in. And I had some poems already written, the Galapagos section and some of the childhood. So it was really a question of going on from there.
So that urgency, maybe that urgency.
Absolutely. I wrote it in 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, because it works. It's so fresh. It is as though you knew him personally.
Well, I think that came very much from my grandmother as well. My grandmother was his granddaughter, and though she never met him, she was his first editor. She edited some of his correspondence with Henslow. She edited the Voyage of the Beagle. She edited his autobiography. So, and she, her whole house which I loved going to, was full of Darwiniana, really. So he was very much a presence there, and she and her cousin Margaret also both modelled their own house and garden on the house of Charles and Emma and down house in Kent. So there was a sense that of continuity there somehow.
Is there one piece from Darwin that you'd like to pick out?
Well, there's so many, but there's one that people really like, which is when he's in when he gets into tropical rainforest for the first time. I mean, he was very, very excited about going there. He'd actually talked about South American rainforest to somebody who had been a slave in Guyana when he was in Edinburgh as a medical student. And, he's longing to visit it. And finally he is. So this would have been...
what page is it, please?
On page 32.
Yeah.
Lavender Light in a leap year. He's on his own in pristine rainforest. Delight is too weak a word for how a naturalist, alone for the first time with all this, must feel. Little does he know of the letter already written he's going to find at Rio. Fanny Owen hasn't hung around. Fanny Owen was the girl he was sort of almost would have been engaged to if he hadn't gone. First oddity, the guttural silence. Then the succulents, bromeliads, parasite plants he's never seen, tree ferns, jade wagon wheels 80 feet up like jugglers' saucers on a pole, bristle of orchid leaves on every branch like green flames over Bibles. Botanical forms gyrate and pour through rivers of otherworld bark and a wrestling musculature of pure live wood. This church-breathing dark. Surely he lived here as a boy or before he was born. He's a rivernaut, a sleepwalker. The lavender light is dim like underwater. One ray, a lost firework, a jewel finger through stained glass. Pale trees of drizzly twilight bloom with epiphytes at their throat, like muezzin platforms on the minarets he's only seen in illustrations. Leaves of all textures that a leaf could be, palm, fluff, prickle, mat and plume, bubbled, shaggy, plush. 1,000 shades of ochre, silver, emerald, smoky brass. He's walking into every dream he's ever seen. I think that's not quite the one that I wanted to read.
If you want to do a different
I know,
one.
it's the next one, it's the last one, like giving to a blind man eyes. But I'll carry on from there.
So what will you do?
The last two lines of the one before.
Okay.
New insects fluttering about still newer flowers. It has been for me a glorious day, like giving to a blind man eyes. And that's what he wrote. So I was very careful in this book to differentiate. I didn't want to attribute things to him without the reader knowing that I was doing the attributing. So it's a sort of scholarly book in a sense as well, because I wanted him to speak for himself. So I've always attributed, I've always put quotation marks around the quotations.
Yes. And yet they sit so comfortably within your poem. And that's a very interesting technique, because we say to people, poets steal, but to see that the technique you use, I think gives us options as poets when we're consciously borrowing. Now it works in this context because it's a real person, but if it's somebody else, say in a writing group that you're riffing off, it's a technique some people could try perhaps. I
wasn't very happy. I mean, I don't think most of the poems work really well as poems. I think that the whole document hangs together. But there are some, for instance, there's one poem, which I'll read a little poem, which I think works as a poem well. It's called Remembering Milton and the Night at Sea, page 41. And funnily enough, several singers have asked if they could set it to music. And he was he was very fond of Paradise Lost, and in a way, Paradise Lost, it has been argued that Paradise Lost stands behind the Origin of Species, because it's the sense of loss. Because the Origin of Species points out that, you know, we are the result of lots and lots of loss of other species, other forms that have gone from dinosaurs onwards, and so in the same thing, loss is behind, you know, the Paradise Lost. So he was reading it, and when he was leaving, he was a young man, sort of 1832. He was just how old? He was 22, and he was leaving Brazil, and he saw the phosphorus on the sea at night, and he said no one could see this without remembering Milton. And I chased up in Milton the passage I thought he must be referring to, and it's when Satan and his armies are coming over. Through the gloom was seen 10,000 banners rise into the air with orient colours waving. That's from book 1. So this is just 3 little stanzas. And it's entirely from his diary, but it's very, very compressed. The night pitch dark, the whole sea luminous, every part of water, which by day is seen as foam, glowed with pale light. The trestle drove before her bows 2 billows of liquid phosphorus. Her wake was a milky train. As far as the eye reached, the crest of every wave was bright, and from the reflected light, the sky just above horizon, not so utterly dark as the rest of the heavens. Impossible to behold this plain of matter, as it were melted and consumed by heat, without remembering Milton.
Yes, it works very well. It's an interesting thing you say about do the individual poems work. I have to say, I read this at one sitting, and I was breathless reading it. So I have to go back and read it. I mean, I read it some years ago, but I have to try and read it in segmented. But I have to say that preparing for today, I mean, I got to, for example, A Sacred Feeling about orchids, and for me that was, you know, that was immediate. On the Prerogative of Mistletoe. No, for me, they did work. Plankton.
Thank you.
Plankton worked. I mean, I'm just seeing what I've marked. I'm a great attacker of books. You know, when I'm reading, I'm in dialogue with them, and you know, I sort of make a mark on what I like. And you know, the page that's untouched is the sad page, because most of them have got some record that I was there. Usually enthusiastic, because I'll stop if I stop feeling that way. But no, to me, I think they do work. But I'll have to go back and consider what you've said. Obviously, you'd have to have bridging. You'd have to have. Sorry,
the poems in Beethoven are better poems as poems, I think, but they're much, because I took much longer about them and I crafted them much more.
Well, there's no doubt it's an evolved book. You know, there is always a progress with your work, and one grows as a reader reading it. You know, so going from, I went back to Darwin when I read Beethoven, because it was that you know, it was a biography, and I felt as a series of linked poems, it did feel like a progressed form. But anyway, I thought this must have been a huge responsibility as a member of the family. Now, you've been speaking to me for 1 hour and 20 minutes. My guess is you may be hungry and tired.
Yes, I think yeah.
Do you I don't know if you're willing to meet me again, and if so, if you would give me some dates. I wonder if there are some themes that we ought to sort of, because this is all wonderful, and it could be a whole, you know, some people could watch this for weeks, I'm sure. They could watch you. But I wonder if we want to try and produce some small areas that we address in sort of, I'll ask a short question and you'll speak for a bit and go back and forth. And if so, Are there any issues you want to raise? I mean, presumably you want
but I think
to talk about.
Very important.
Yes, I've got it. Which, sorry, tell me again what you.
Well, it's called "We Are All from Somewhere Else." It's the.
I've got that.
Yeah,
yeah. I love this.
I think it's an important book because it's a sort of meditation on migration, and migration is, you know, it includes now a lot about climate change, but it's also, you know, how it's about how strangers and you know, the heart of it is really when I talk about how strangers are. You know, all our old religions say you have to be kind to the stranger. So that's, where are we? The section. I mean, for me, the section, the process.
147 is the start of that section.
Yeah. That for me is the section of the thought of this book, but it's sort of halfway through in a way. Well, we could talk about that next time, and we could talk about also, I suppose, science and biology on the one hand, which is Darwin, and all the animal migration poems in this, which are the first half, and then you know, the sort of politics about human rights, which comes into quite a lot of things in different ways.
And maybe, I don't know if this is presumptuous, and if you think it's not the right approach, we can take a more conventional one, but should we talk about our own friendship or our relationship? Can we say this is an issue, particularly the human rights issue, that has exercised both of us, both of us, and you know, I might have to say something like, I come at it with a lot of pain. And I don't know how you would say you came at it. Do you write from pain, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody writes from a certain amount of pain, and different sorts of pain in different sorts of areas. Yeah.
Do you think we could have a slight to and froing in the question so that it looks like a conversation between women?
Sure.
Because I think, I don't know if I can hold up my end, but I know when I teach, a lot of my technique is to try and make the people in the groups, I mean, they're just groups where they read poetry on screen like this we've done, and then they read it aloud in the class, and then they write from prompts. And the whole, I mean, I've done a lot during COVID, and it's, I suppose, given people somewhere to go as well as, you know, help them read more, etc. But it's all about making people feel that they are part of what we do. Do you know what I mean? It's not an us and a them. And of course, there is not another person who's going to be able to do what you do. But that sort of illusion of democracy.
Well, I think it's an illusion. I mean, everybody writes different things. Everybody writes their own things, and you just want to help people do it better. And sometimes when you're teaching somebody and they're you know, they're wonderful, and sometimes they're very, very thoughtful, but they're not ever going to get it, and it's just very hard.
And sometimes you find people with the most natural of voices, and that's if they can get enough, or if they're bolshy enough actually to hold on to those voices, you get fantastic results, don't you? I mean,
but I think the human rights, I think the human rights are particularly about. It's not really about the right to write. It's about the right to live and to, you know, often.
Of course, yes, absolutely. That's right. And I don't know about you, but I think, would you say that it's from a woman and children's point of view a lot of the time for you, or would you say it's a universal thing? It goes into the animals. It goes
here about G4 and taking back. No, it's not particularly about. I mean, it's injustice is what it's about a lot.
Yes, So I'll look at the G4 again, that G4 section.
Well, also then the next section of that, Children of Storm, Strangers, and then Children of Storm.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go into this one, and
then also the Lesbos. So it goes up to page 225.
Okay.
So for instance, you get for instance, I mean, here's Ghost Ship, which is page 226. I'll just read this to finish.
Okay.
Ghost Ship. You have to get out. But this is how you imagine you might go when you wake at night, afraid of moving on from Gambia or Guinea-Bissau, and hear the red slick in your temple beat like waves around the ghost ship discovered off Ragged Point, Barbados. A 6-foot yacht adrift, no name, no flag, and a phantom crew, 11 young men in green, red, orange, blue, mummified in salt of their own sweat. You can't shake out of your head that airline ticket from Senegal, the note in a dead boy's pocket. Excuse me, this is the end. Sorry to my family in Basada. Saying how the skipper disappeared before they left Cape Verde, and how he could have jumped like his friend when they were towed, and how one night the rope was slashed by a machete.